The sky above Starfell Valley had always been alive with wonder. Every evening, as dusk draped her violet shawl across the mountains, the stars would tumble from the heavens like glowing fireflies, slipping silently into the folds of the earth. People said the stars came to rest among the flowers, turning petals into sparkles and streams into ribbons of starlight. And in the very heart of the valley, nestled in a small stone cottage with ivy-covered walls and a chimney that puffed like a sleepy dragon, lived a quiet girl named Liora. Liora was not loud, nor bold, nor the kind of girl that stories usually followed. She often sat by her window, her chin resting on her hands, watching the sky. Every night, without fail, she lit a small lantern, an old glass orb wrapped in silver wire, and placed it carefully on her windowsill. It was a tradition passed down by the women in her family, a lantern to keep the light alive. Her grandmother, Mima, always said, "The world needs light, child, not just in the sky, but in the soul." When you keep the lantern burning, you remind the stars we're still here, waiting for them. So Liora lit her lantern, even when her heart felt heavy, even when no one else remembered to. But tonight felt different. The wind had changed, cooler, quieter. The valley seemed to hold its breath. Liora leaned out the window, her curls dancing in the breeze. The first star shimmered in the indigo sky, and then fell. A single golden streak shot downward, brighter than any star she'd seen before. It didn't vanish into the earth like usual. Instead, it flickered, fading, until it disappeared before reaching the ground. Liora's eyes widened. "Did you see that, Mima?" From her rocking chair near the hearth, Mima turned her wise old eyes to the sky. She did not smile. "That was the last falling star," she whispered. Liora frowned. "What do you mean the last?" Mima stood slowly and walked over to the old cedar chest by the fireplace. From within it, she pulled a bundle wrapped in velvet. She unwrapped it gently, revealing a lantern unlike any Liora had ever seen. Its glass shimmered like a dragonfly's wings, and its handle was carved from starwood, a silvery branch that pulsed with warmth. "This," Mima said, placing it in Liora's hands, "was once your mother's. And her mother's before her. It's the last enchanted lantern. It holds the ember of the Skyfire itself." "The Skyfire," Liora echoed. Mima nodded. "Long ago, the stars didn't fall, they rose, born from the courage and dreams of people on Earth. But as hope faded, so did the fire that fed them. Now the Skyfire grows weak. And if it dies, the stars will never return." Liora's voice trembled. "What can we do?" Mima knelt before her, her wrinkled hands wrapping Liora's fingers around the lantern. "The ember inside this lantern still glows. It only needs one brave heart to carry it back to the source, to the Skyfire. You, child, must be that heart." Liora's eyes filled with fear. "Me, I'm just me. Even small lights can guide whole worlds," Mima said softly. "You were born under the falling stars. There's light in you the darkness cannot reach." Outside, the night deepened. No stars shimmered, only silence reigned above the valley. Inside, Liora stood still, the enchanted lantern warming her palms. "I'm scared," she whispered. "That means you're about to do something brave," Mima said, and gently kissed her forehead. Just then, a soft tapping came from the window. Liora turned, and gasped. A glowing moth, as large as her hand, hovered in the night air. Its wings shimmered with soft gold and deep indigo. It tapped again, politely. "Open it," Mima urged. As Liora unlatched the window, the moth fluttered inside and hovered before her. "I've come to guide you," it said in a voice like wind through reeds. "My name is Thimble, and the road ahead begins at dawn." Liora clutched the lantern to her chest, her heart pounding like a drum. The stars were gone. The world was dimming, but in her hands, a single ember still glowed. And with that, the journey of the lantern keeper had begun. She watched, wide-eyed, as the glowing creature settled on the edge of her windowsill, folding its glittering wings with grace and care. Its eyes sparkled like tiny constellations, and when it spoke again, its voice carried a rhythm like lullabies sung under starlight. "I am Thimble," it repeated gently. "Messenger of the Skyfire." The stars called, and your lantern answered. Liora clutched the glowing lantern tighter. It pulsed softly, warm and steady in her hands. How do you know me? She asked in a hushed voice. Thimble tilted its head, as if smiling. You've been lighting the lantern every night, even when the stars began to fade. Hope lingers where hearts are faithful. The Skyfire remembers. Liora glanced at her grandmother, who simply gave a soft nod and returned to her chair by the hearth. You'll have to leave soon, child, Mima said, her voice steady but gentle. Before the shadow deepens. Liora turned back to Thimble. Where do I go? Thimble fluttered closer. To the edge of the forgotten wilds. There lies the first path. But beware, this world is not as it once was. The shadow spreads where dreams are lost. It steals light and replaces it with silence. Leora's heart trembled. And what if I get lost too? You won't, Thimble replied. Because your lantern carries a spark from the first light. And because you are not alone anymore. The moth rose, twirling in the air like a ribbon of gold. Mima stood again, this time with a satchel in her hands. She packed it with a flask of stardew water, dried berry bread, and a small journal with a quill tucked into its spine. She kissed Leora's brow and wrapped a soft shawl around her shoulders. You have always been brave, Mima whispered. You just didn't know it yet. Tears welled in Leora's eyes. She didn't want to leave her home, her window, her familiar quiet life. But somewhere deep inside, a flame had begun to stir, a quiet warmth that whispered, go. With trembling hands, she slung the satchel across her shoulder and tied the lantern to her belt. Thimble hovered above her. We must walk by night. The darkness will test you, but your light will answer. Liora gave one last look to her grandmother, who smiled despite the worry in her eyes. Come back to us, child, Mima said. And bring the stars with you. Then, with a deep breath and trembling fingers, Liora stepped out into the night. The valley was quiet, far too quiet. No crickets sang, no owls hooted. Even the river that usually babbled beneath the wooden bridge seemed to have stilled, as if holding its voice in fear of what the darkness might carry. As they walked, Thimble's wings left a faint trail of sparkling dust that floated for moments before fading. Leora's lantern glowed like a soft golden bubble, pushing back the shadows just enough for her to see the path ahead. Where did the stars go? She asked after a while. They were forgotten, Thimble said sadly. Bit by bit, people stopped believing in wonder. They stopped listening to dreams, and so the stars, born from hope and courage, began to fall. One by one. And now, they are no more. Liora looked up. The sky was nothing but a great black dome, empty and cold. But not all hope is lost, Thimble added. Not while your light still shines. They walked for what felt like hours, leaving behind the soft hills of the valley and entering woods where trees bent low, whispering secrets in voices made of leaves. Liora listened closely, but the words were just out of reach, like a song she once knew but couldn't remember. She paused by an old stone marker covered in moss. Thimble stopped too. We rest here tonight. Beyond this stone lies the forest of forgotten voices. Liora shivered. It sounds sad. It is. But it's the first place your light is needed. She sat against the stone, cradling the lantern in her lap. The warmth of it seeped into her skin, as if it were alive, as if it knew what was coming and had faith in her. Thimble, she whispered. Yes. Do you think I can really do this? The moth landed on her shoulder. I know you can. Not because you are fearless, but because you keep walking, even while afraid. That is what the stars were made from. Liora blinked back tears. She stared into the lantern's light, and for a moment, she saw something, faint but clear, her own reflection, steady and glowing. The sky may have been empty, but inside her, a star was being born. By morning, the sky remained dark. No sunrise came, no golden light spilled across the grass. The world was trapped in an endless night, but Leora's lantern still glowed, a quiet promise in the gloom. She stood beside the moss-covered stone with Thimble perched gently on her shoulder. Are you ready? The moth asked softly. Liora nodded, though her heart pounded like thunder inside her chest. With each step forward, the forest rose around her, tall, tangled trees with twisted trunks and silvery bark. Their leaves shimmered with strange hues, not green, but pale blue, smoky gray, and dusty lavender. Fog slithered through the roots like lazy snakes. The air was thick with whispers. Liora slowed. Are they voices? Yes, Thimble replied. This is the forest of forgotten voices. It is filled with the echoes of dreams that were abandoned, promises broken, and words left unsaid. A chill crawled down Leora's back. The whispers grew louder. You're not good enough. You'll never make it. Turn back before it's too late. The voices were not shouted. They were murmured, sweet and poisonous, like honey hiding thorny nettles. They sound like my own thoughts, Liora whispered. They are, Thimble said, fluttering near. This forest shows you the fears you never spoke aloud. The doubts you buried. But remember, the lantern's light is truth. Hold it close. Liora clutched her lantern tighter. The golden glow flickered faintly. As they walked deeper, the trees grew closer together. Branches reached like hands. Leora's footsteps echoed, though the ground was soft with moss. Faces seemed to flicker in the bark, eyes full of sadness, mouths whispering words she didn't want to hear. A memory rose in her mind. She was 6 years old, hiding behind her mother's skirt at a village gathering. Children laughed and danced, but Liora had stayed back, afraid they wouldn't like her. She had felt invisible, unwanted. Why try? The forest whispered now. You'll only be forgotten again. Tears stung her eyes. She kept walking. Then came another voice, clearer, louder. You don't belong on this journey. You're not special. The whisper curled around her like smoke. The trees opened to a small clearing, and in the center stood a reflection. It was Liora, but not her as she was now. This Liora was pale, tired, afraid. Her eyes were dull. Her shoulders drooped. The reflection looked at her and said, "Go home. You can't do this. You're not brave." Leora's knees shook. She lowered her eyes, her grip on the lantern loosening. Thimble darted in front of her face. "Don't listen. That voice is not your future, it's your fear." "I don't know if I can go on," Liora whispered. "Then sing," Thimble said. Liora blinked. "What?" "Sing what you remember," the moth urged. "Let your own voice be louder than your fear." She hesitated. Her throat was tight, but somewhere in the folds of memory, a melody stirred, soft and trembling. Her mother's lullaby, lantern glowing, stars still knowing. Hope will shine when winds are blowing. The forest stilled, hearts that fear but still keep glowing. Shall find the path where light is going. The reflection began to fade. The branches loosened. The voices hushed. Liora stepped forward, her voice growing steadier. Though the night is dark and wide, my lantern walks close by my side. The moment she finished the last line, the reflection shattered into silver light. Her lantern flared bright and golden. The darkness surrounding the trees peeled back like old paint, revealing glowing blossoms along the roots and soft light trickling through the branches. The whispers were gone. Liora stood straight, breathless, the lantern blazing like a star. Thimble hovered before her. "You remembered yourself." Liora nodded slowly. "I forgot that I had a voice. That I could choose to believe in it. Now," Thimble said with pride, "the forest will let you pass." As they continued forward, the trees bowed slightly, their trunks illuminated by the lantern's glow. Where once had been fear, now shimmered peace. Tiny fire petal flowers bloomed along the path, each one glowing with a gentle light, forgotten dreams that had found their way home. At the far edge of the forest stood a broken stone archway covered in glowing ivy. Thimble turned to her. "Beyond this, the journey deepens. You'll face not what you fear, but what you believe about yourself. But remember, your light has grown." Liora looked down at the lantern, then up to the path ahead. She had made it through the forest of her own doubt, not by being fearless, but by choosing to sing in the shadows. And that, she thought, was the kind of bravery stars were made of. The broken archway behind Liora faded into the mist, and before her stretched a quiet valley wrapped in silver fog. No stars twinkled above, and no birds dared sing. The only sound was the soft trickling of water ahead, gentle, persistent, and strangely melodic. "The river of reflection," Thimble whispered from her shoulder, his glow dimmer than usual. "Here, the water does not show what is, it shows what lies within." Liora felt her chest tighten. She had faced the forest of forgotten voices, but this place felt different. Heavier, closer, as if her own thoughts walked ahead of her, waiting to be seen. They walked silently until the trees gave way to an open shore. There, the river flowed, not of water, but of liquid silver, swirling like melted starlight. It glimmered faintly in the dim light of Liora's lantern. She knelt at the edge, peering into its depths. The surface was glass smooth, as if it held its breath. Then her reflection shifted, and it wasn't just her face looking back. Instead, the river showed moments. Liora as a child, curled in her bed, crying quietly after another day of being invisible in the crowd. Liora watching the other village children laugh while she stood alone near the fence, pretending she didn't care. Liora holding her mother's hand at a grave, her father's, trying to be brave while her heart ached. She gasped and pulled back, but the images kept coming. The river was not cruel, but it was honest. Thimble fluttered beside her. You cannot cross the river of reflection until you face it. All of it. I didn't know I still carried this much pain, she whispered. Most people don't, Thimble said softly. But pain that is not named becomes a shadow that follows us. Let your light shine into it. Liora sat down, her lantern resting in her lap. She stared into the silver surface again, and this time, let the images come. She saw her loneliness, her anger, her guilt. The small cruelties she'd endured. The quiet ways she had hidden herself. And then, she saw something new. She saw herself, this version of herself, leaving home, carrying the lantern, walking into fear, singing in the darkness. She saw her own strength, not bold or loud, but steady and faithful. Tears slipped down her cheeks. But they weren't only from sadness. They were from understanding. I used to believe I wasn't enough, she whispered. But I was wrong. The lantern pulsed in her lap. A golden ripple spread from it across the surface of the river. The silver water shimmered, then parted like a curtain. A narrow path of starlit stones rose from the riverbed, leading to the opposite shore. You've done it, Thimble said, his wings sparkling once more. You saw yourself truly, and still chose to keep going. Liora rose, her legs trembling slightly, but her steps were sure. She crossed the starlit path, each footstep steady. Around her, the river flowed quietly, no longer showing painful memories, but dreams. She glimpsed herself lighting lanterns for others, singing to children, lifting a valley from its slumber. And in one vision, a future she had never dared to hope, herself standing on a mountaintop, raising the lantern high as stars burst into life above her. She reached the other side. The mist lifted. The sky above shimmered faintly, still dark, but no longer hopeless. Liora turned to see the river behind her settle into silence. It is no easy thing to face what lives inside your heart, Thimble said. You did not run from it. You honored it. I thought it would break me, Liora replied. But it freed me. The lantern on her belt now burned brighter than ever, casting soft circles of gold along the path ahead. You are changing, Thimble said gently. Liora smiled, small but sure. No, she said, I think I'm becoming. They continued walking. Beyond the river, a new sound rose on the wind, a low howl. Distant, strange. The path ahead twisted into a series of steep hills and sharp winds. Liora squared her shoulders and took another step forward. Whatever came next, she was not the same girl who had sat by her window waiting for stars. She was the girl walking toward them. The path curved sharply, climbing into the bones of the valley where no trees grew and no flowers dared to bloom. Gray stones littered the earth, sharp-edged and silent. The air shifted. It wasn't just cold, it carried a voice. A howl. A long, empty wail that curled around Liora's bones like a shiver with no source. They had reached the Hill of Hollow Winds. The hill itself rose like a lonely sentinel, steep and jagged. Liora stared upward, eyes squinting against the gusts already tugging at her shawl and hair. At the summit, a cracked spire of stone pointed toward the sky, as if challenging the stars that had abandoned it. Thimble fluttered near, his wings flickering in the wind. This is where many turn back, he said. The winds here carry all the voices of doubt and fear from the world below. They'll whisper to you, twist your thoughts. But remember, the winds can bend a flame, but they cannot break it. Liora nodded, pulling her shawl tighter. Let's go. The first few steps were easy, winding along the lower ridge where the wind only whispered. But the higher she climbed, the louder the voices became. You're just a girl. You should be home, where it's safe. This isn't your story to tell. The wind screamed these things in her ears, not like words, but like thoughts, ones she had once believed. She pressed onward, the wind growing stronger with every step. Her lantern swayed at her side, its flame flickering madly. She climbed on hands and knees now, the rocks scraping her palms. The gusts held around her, yanking at her shawl, her satchel, her very breath. A particularly harsh gust knocked her to the ground. She cried out, clutching the earth. The lantern slipped from her belt, rolled once, twice, toward the edge. No, she gasped, scrambling forward. Just in time, her fingers closed around its handle. She pulled it close and curled around it, shielding its glow with her body. The wind roared above her like a beast denied its prey. For a moment, she stayed like that, trembling, hurting, unsure if she could go on. I can't do this, she whispered, tears slipping down her cheeks. Then she remembered Mima's voice. Greater than, the light only bends, it never breaks. Liora sat up, her hair wild, her eyes fierce. She raised the lantern into the air. Its light flickered, but did not go out. I'm not turning back, she said to the wind. The wind snarled around her, but it could not pull her down. She climbed, one hand after another, feet slipping on loose gravel. Her knees bled, her breath burned, but step by step, she rose. At the summit, the wind screamed like a storm, but Liora stood tall, lantern raised, her shawl fluttering behind her like a flag. The wind rushed at her one final time, trying to extinguish the flame. It didn't. The lantern blazed, bright, bold, brilliant. The wind suddenly broke, like glass shattering into silence. The hill stilled, the voices vanished, and all that remained was the sound of Leora's breath, and the soft, strong glow of her light. Thimble landed beside her, eyes wide. No one has ever made the wind bow before, he said. Liora looked down at her scraped palms, her muddy boots, her bleeding knees. She smiled. It didn't break me, she said. It tried, but it didn't. Below, the valley shimmered faintly. A warm breeze rose, gentle, not wild. And in that moment, the clouds above the hill cracked slightly, revealing the faint shimmer of one distant star. Liora stared at it. One star. Still watching, still waiting. The journey was not over, but she was no longer walking as a shadow of who she had been. She was walking as someone who could climb winds and rise with them. After the winds of the hollow hill had quieted behind them, Liora and Thimble descended into a new kind of silence, one that felt neither heavy nor dark, but strange, as if the very air was waiting. The sky above was still void of stars, but the clouds had parted slightly. Pale light from Leora's lantern bathed the winding path ahead in golden hues, glinting off rocks that sparkled like frozen time. In the distance, a towering silhouette rose from the earth, a massive clock tower, tilted slightly to one side, wrapped in vines and gears as tall as trees. Its hands were frozen, both stuck at the same moment, midnight. The clock tower of lost time, Thimble murmured. Liora stepped closer, staring up in awe. The structure didn't look ruined, but paused. Like it had chosen to stop breathing. Beneath its great shadow, time itself seemed to hold still. No leaves stirred, no wind rustled, even the air around her lantern hung motionless. What happened here? She asked. Time stopped, Thimble said, landing softly on a low gear. There is a keeper who lives inside. Long ago, he made a choice, to freeze time so that he would never have to lose anything again. Why? Because he was afraid. Afraid of change, of endings, of goodbye. Liora felt a pang in her chest. She stepped through the towering arched doorway of the clock tower. Inside, the world was frozen mid-motion. Books floated mid-fall. A teacup hovered just above the ground, never touching. Paintbrush strokes hung unfinished in the air. It was a beautiful kind of stillness, but lifeless. And there, seated upon a suspended platform of glass and gears, was a man with silver hair and a long dark coat. His eyes were shut, and his hand rested on a giant brass key embedded into the clock's center. The keeper, Thimble whispered. Liora approached carefully. The keeper's face looked young and old all at once, like someone who had lived far too long without living at all. Suddenly, his eyes opened. Pale and distant, like clouds remembering a storm. "You carry the lantern," he said in a quiet voice. "But it will not work here. Time does not move. Light cannot grow." Liora lifted the lantern anyway. It flickered gently, casting golden light across the frozen floor. "Why did you stop time?" she asked softly. The keeper's gaze lowered. "Because time brings loss. I once had everything I loved. And then, one by one, I lost them. So I stopped time to keep what little I had left." "But you also stopped life," Liora said. The keeper's voice turned bitter. "What is life but a long goodbye? It's also a long hello," Liora said. "A chance to grow, to remember, to love again." He turned away. "The world forgets. I've watched it. The stars fell. The dreams faded. No one remembered." "I remembered," Liora said gently. "I lit the lantern every night. Even when the stars stopped falling." The keeper looked at her, truly seeing her now. "You're not just here for the Skyfire," he said. "You're here to remind us." Liora stepped closer. "Loss hurts. But stillness hurts more. Even stars are meant to fall, to rise again. That's what hope is." She reached out and placed her lantern beside the brass key. The light flowed through it, golden threads winding through the gears, into the walls, the ceiling, the air itself. For a moment, everything was quiet. Then, click, the clock's hands twitched. A heartbeat later, bong, the tower trembled with the sound of a bell ringing out for the first time in centuries. The frozen books fell. The teacup shattered. Paintbrush strokes finished themselves in midair. Light filled every corner of the tower. Time had begun to move again. The keeper stared, eyes wide and wet. "I thought I was keeping what mattered safe," he said. "But I was only keeping it from growing." He turned to Liora, his voice filled with wonder. "You've reminded me that endings are not the enemy. Forgetting is." She smiled. "Then remember this moment. And keep going." He nodded. The great gears turned. The walls breathed again. The clock hands moved freely. As Liora stepped outside, the entire tower glowed softly behind her, no longer a monument to fear, but a beacon of rediscovery. Above, the clouds shifted. 2 stars shimmered faintly. Liora stared at them, her heart catching in her chest. One for yesterday, one for tomorrow, and her lantern, her now, burning brighter than ever. The road beyond the clock tower felt alive again. Time moved forward. Leaves rustled. The wind carried soft scents of earth and mist. And as Liora walked, the lantern at her side burned stronger. Not just a gentle glow now, but a steady beam that pulsed like a heartbeat. Ahead, the path narrowed into a canyon of stone. Jagged cliffs loomed on either side, and the sky overhead was just a ribbon of dark gray. At the canyon's end, tucked between 2 enormous slabs of rock, was a hollow arch. Beyond it, darkness. Liora hesitated. Thimble hovered at her side, his wings fluttering softly. "The cave of echoing light," he said. "This is where the truth of the Skyfire lives." "What kind of truth?" Liora asked. "The kind that echoes back what the world forgets, the courage of those who keep going. The light that never stops reaching. You'll see it, you'll feel it, but it may not be easy." Liora stepped through the archway. The cave swallowed them in silence. Inside, the stone walls sparkled with dim reflections of her lantern's light. Every step she took caused that light to bounce in every direction, dancing on the walls, above her head, beneath her feet. The silence was total, no wind, no insects, no whispers. And then, with a pulse of golden warmth, the lantern began to glow brighter. Suddenly, the cave was filled with echoes. But not of voices, of light. Shimmering images bloomed on the walls, like memories captured in stardust. Liora gasped. She saw a mother kneeling beside a frightened child, lighting a small candle against the storm. She saw a boy with a limp standing tall before a shadowy figure, clutching a book to his chest. She saw a grandmother placing a lantern in her granddaughter's hands with trembling fingers. She saw herself, walking through the forest of forgotten voices, climbing the hill of hollow winds, standing against the shadow of the skyless night. "These are echoes of bravery," Thimble whispered reverently. "The Skyfire does not just burn in the stars. It burns in them. In you. Tears welled in Leora's eyes. I never realized. Every kind act, every brave step, every quiet light, adds to the Skyfire, Thimble said. The stars do not just fall from the sky. They rise from within. As they ventured deeper, the echoes grew more radiant. And then, the chamber opened into a vast hollow space, an enormous cavern where the ceiling stretched higher than any building in Starfell Valley. A pool of mirrored water filled the floor, still and silent. In its reflection, Liora saw not herself, but millions of glowing lights. Lanterns, candles, fireflies, starlit hearts from all over the world. I thought I was alone, she whispered. You were never alone, Thimble replied. You just hadn't seen the echoes yet. Liora knelt by the water's edge and held out her lantern. Its glow met the surface, and ripples of golden light spread outward, joining the reflections, becoming one with the whole. The cave hummed softly, like a lullaby sung by the earth itself. Then the stone beneath the water began to shift. A pedestal rose slowly from the depths, and on it lay a crystal sphere, small, delicate, and pulsing faintly. The heart of the Skyfire, Thimble breathed. It has been sleeping, waiting for someone who still believes. Liora stepped forward, hands trembling, and lifted the crystal. The moment her fingers touched it, her lantern flared. The cave exploded with light, soft, beautiful, golden like the dawn. From the walls, every echo sang in unison, a wordless song of courage, hope, and rising light. And within the heart of it all stood Liora, no longer the shy girl at the window, but the lantern keeper, chosen not by perfection, but by perseverance. The Skyfire stirred within the crystal. It's waking up, Liora whispered. Yes, Thimble said, his wings glowing brighter than ever. And now, it needs you to carry it home. The light of the Skyfire pulsed within the crystal sphere in Leora's hands, warm and weightless, like holding a promise made by the stars themselves. The cave behind her faded into a memory of echoes and light. Thimble flew silently at her side, his wings glittering with quiet awe. They walked together through a field of ancient stone where time no longer mattered. The stars above, still dim and few, flickered faintly, watching. Waiting. Ahead, the land rose into a final peak. A path of dark stone led up the mountainside, spiraling toward a place that felt both ancient and untouched. As they climbed, the wind changed again. Cold, hollow, familiar. Liora shivered. Is it near? She asked. Thimble gave a slow nod. Yes. The shadow lives where the light dares not reach. At the summit, the path ended. And before them, the sky opened, dark, vast, and endless. But this was no night sky. This was a tear in the sky itself. A swirling vortex of shadows and silence. A wound in the heavens. It pulsed with something deep and dreadful. Not loud, not angry, but hungry. It pulled at the edges of light, tugging, stealing. There, rising from the center of the torn sky, was a figure. Tall, cloaked in endless black. No face, only a shifting mask of darkness. It had no eyes, yet Liora felt its gaze. This was the shadow beyond the sky. It did not speak aloud. It did not need to. Its voice entered her mind like a chill. Greater than, why do you struggle so hard to save a world that let the stars die? Leora's breath caught in her throat. Greater than, they forgot. They stopped believing. They let the night win. And you, just a girl with a flickering light, believe you can undo it. Her knees wobbled. The Skyfire in her hands dimmed slightly. The shadow floated closer, tendrils of darkness curling toward her lantern. Greater than, give it to me. Let the stars sleep. Let the silence remain. You don't need to carry this burden. Liora trembled. And then, she remembered the echoes. The forest where she had sung in the dark. The river where she had faced her fears. The hill she had climbed on bloodied knees. The time she had helped turn forward again. And all the lights she had seen reflected in the cave of echoing light, millions of tiny, flickering souls who still tried. Still hoped. Still believed. Her grip tightened around the Skyfire. No, she said softly. The shadow recoiled slightly. No, she said again, louder this time. You're wrong. They didn't forget. They just lost their way. But the stars are still there. And so are we. The shadow's shape grew larger, looming, spreading like a thundercloud. Greater than, you are alone. I am not, Liora cried, lifting her lantern high. I carry all of them with me. The lantern flared. The Skyfire burst into life, and a beam of radiant light exploded from the sphere, white and gold and silver, piercing straight into the heart of the darkness. The shadow shrieked, a terrible, silent wail. It tried to swallow the light. But this time, the light didn't just glow. It fought back. For every doubt the shadow sent, the Skyfire answered with a memory. For every fear, it offered truth. For every silence, a voice rose. The light grew brighter, brighter still, until it wasn't just the lantern glowing. Liora herself shimmered, wrapped in threads of starlight, her heart beating in time with the very pulse of the universe. The shadow cracked, split, screamed again, and then, it shattered. The sky tore open, not in pain, but in healing. And from that wound, stars burst forth. Hundreds, thousands, countless. They spilled across the heavens like a silver river, returning to their home. The stars had been waiting for a light strong enough to bring them back. That light had been Liora. The world stood still. She stood alone on the mountaintop, breathless, her lantern now as bright as the moon. Thimble landed on her shoulder, silent in reverence. It's done, he whispered. She looked up. The stars twinkled like old friends. The torn sky had mended. The silence was gone, and in its place was a song, a quiet one, yes, but full of strength. The night sky had changed. What was once a hollow vault of darkness now shimmered with stars, new and ancient, forgotten and reborn, all burning bright with golden blue fire. The mountaintop where Liora stood glowed gently beneath them. Her lantern no longer flickered, it blazed, steady and sure, as if it had drawn strength from every soul who had ever believed in the light. Thimble fluttered silently beside her, his wings trailing silver sparks. It's beautiful, Liora whispered, her eyes wide with wonder. I didn't know there were so many stars waiting. They weren't gone, Thimble said. Just dimmed, waiting for someone to remember them. Above them, the stars began to shift, forming patterns, glowing symbols that shimmered like constellations drawn by dreaming hearts. One burned brighter than the rest, growing larger, descending like a slow, graceful comet. It landed just ahead of Liora on the mountaintop, taking the shape of a glowing doorway made of pure starlight. The Skyfire calls, Thimble said. You must enter. Liora stepped forward slowly, heart thudding. She passed through the light, and entered a world made entirely of flame and memory. She stood in the chamber of the Skyfire. It was not a place, exactly, not earth or air or sky, but something between. A shimmering realm where the stars were born. Light flowed like rivers. Shapes danced like shadows made of music. And at the center hovered a flame unlike any other. The Skyfire. It wasn't just fire, it was life. The purest light. Not hot, not burning, but warm like love, like laughter, like the first time someone truly believed in you. Liora stepped toward it. The crystal sphere, still glowing in her hands, lifted on its own. Threads of light connected it to the Skyfire, and the moment they touched, everything awoke. The Skyfire flared, brighter than the sun. From it, waves of glowing flame burst outward, flooding the realm with radiant light. The stars beyond the sky blazed anew. The paths between worlds opened. The dreams of millions, silent, waiting, stirred in their sleep. Liora stood at the heart of it all. She didn't feel small. She felt part of something infinite. A voice echoed through the chamber, not loud, not male or female, but pure and whole. Greater than, Lantern Keeper, you have done what no one else dared. You remembered when the world forgot. You gave light where there was none. And now, the fire lives again. Liora knelt, tears running freely down her cheeks. Not from sadness, but from knowing. The Skyfire pulsed once more, then gently entered the crystal sphere. It rested inside like a sun caught in glass, alive, beating, eternal. You are its bearer now, the voice said. Until the stars no longer need reminding. The doorway reappeared behind her, this time glowing with golden vines and silver blossoms. She turned, stepping back through it, and returned to the mountaintop. The stars now danced across the sky like sparks from a divine bonfire. Winds whispered joyful songs. Distant bells rang in far-off villages as if the world, too, had felt the change. Thimble landed gently on her shoulder. "It's done," he said. "You rekindled the Skyfire." Liora smiled through her tears. "No," she said. "We did." They began the descent down the mountain, the world around them brighter with each step. Villages lit lanterns in their windows again. Children pointed to the sky and laughed. Rivers glowed faintly with starlight. Trees shimmered with silver dew. And above them, the Skyfire blazed. Not just in the heavens, but in every heart that dared to hope again. Liora walked down from the mountain with the Skyfire in her lantern and the stars above her newly reborn. The world had changed. Not loudly, not suddenly, but in quiet, wondrous ways. Where there had been silence, now there was birdsong. Where there had been gray skies, now there were stars. Where there had been forgotten dreams, now there was light. The trees along the path swayed with joy. Petals glowed along the forest floor. Even the winds seemed to bow gently as Liora passed. Thimble fluttered beside her, silent for once, as if no words were needed. As they reached the edge of Starfell Valley, a golden mist began to rise, slowly, softly, like the breath of the world exhaling at last. Then she saw it. Her home. The lantern in her window still flickered, as faithful as the heart that had lit it. She approached the little cottage, the roof still mossy, the garden overgrown but waiting. Smoke curled gently from the chimney. The scent of cinnamon drifted through the air. The door opened. Mima stood there, her eyes wide with wonder. Her hands flew to her mouth as she took in the sight of Liora, stronger, taller somehow, her hair tousled by mountain wind, her shawl dusted in starlight, and the lantern at her side burning like a piece of the sky. "Child," Mima breathed. Liora rushed into her arms. They held each other for a long, quiet moment. Then Mima pulled back and whispered, "The stars are back." Liora nodded, eyes shining. "They remembered us. And we remembered them." Word spread through the valley like a rising song. Doors opened. Villagers stepped outside. Children pointed to the sky, their eyes wide. Elders wept softly. The sky above Starfell Valley was alive with stars. Hundreds, thousands, more than ever before. Constellations danced and shifted, glowing with deep and quiet joy. Liora walked to the center of the village and hung her lantern on the old iron hook at the heart of the square. Its light bathed the village in gold. "Tonight," she said, "we remember the light within us. And tomorrow, we carry it forward." A child stepped forward, eyes wide. "Are you the lantern keeper now?" she asked. Liora knelt, smiling. "We all are," she said gently. "Every time we hope, or dream, or help someone find their light again, we are keeping the flame alive." The villagers lit their own lanterns. One by one, window by window, path by path, until the entire valley sparkled like a reflection of the sky above. Liora sat beneath her favorite old tree and gazed upward. For the first time in what felt like forever, the stars were watching back. Not as distant guardians, but as companions. A soft flutter landed on her shoulder. "Thimble, will you stay?" she asked. He tilted his tiny head. "For as long as there are lights to tend." She smiled. And in that quiet night, beneath a sky reborn, Liora, once the girl who watched from the window, now shone like a star among stars. Not because she was fearless, but because she carried the light, even when it was hardest. Especially when it was darkest. Sparkles the end sparkles. Glowing star moral lesson of the story. Greater than, even in the darkest places, the smallest light can rekindle a universe. True courage is not the absence of fear, but the quiet decision to keep shining anyway. We all carry stars inside us, waiting only for belief to bring them to life. For more motivation stories, please like, share and subscribe this channel. Thanks and God bless.